The Galactic Embassy's kitchen had seen 1,000 chefs fail, each one dismissed before their spatula cooled. The alien delegates wanted nothing Earth could offer, especially not breakfast. But when a single father arrived with his daughter's recipe and a cast-iron skillet older than the peace treaty, the queen, who had refused food for 3 cycles, finally leaned forward. Because what rose from that griddle would change everything the galaxy believed about worth. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode is even more unbelievable than this one. The Galactic Embassy rose like a shard of captured starlight, its towers humming with languages that had never touched Earth's air until the treaty. Inside, past the marble halls where diplomats argued over borders drawn in vacuum, the kitchen sat empty. It had been empty for 6 days. The last chef, a decorated culinary artist from New Tokyo, had walked out mid-shift, her knives abandoned on the counter like surrender flags. Before her, 9 others. Before them, a trail of broken contracts and singed pride stretching back to the embassy's opening. James Porter stood at the kitchen's threshold, his daughter's hand small and warm in his. Lily pressed against his hip, her eyes wide as moons, taking in the chrome surfaces that gleamed like frozen rivers and the strange geometric ovens that pulsed with light he couldn't name. She squeezed his fingers 3 times, their code. "Are you scared?" He squeezed back twice. "A little. But we're okay." The administrator, a rail-thin Qualorian with skin like polished obsidian, clicked his translator implant and gestured at the industrial range. "You understand the position," he said, not asked. His voice carried the texture of skepticism ground fine. "Human chefs have not succeeded here." James nodded. He wore his only interview clothes, a button-down shirt gone soft at the elbows, slacks that Lily had helped him iron that morning, her tongue poking out in concentration. In his other hand, he carried a canvas bag that smelled faintly of cinnamon and old paper. "They want molecular gastronomy," the administrator continued. "They want spectacle, edible sculptures, flavor profiles encoded in vapor." He waved a 3-fingered hand at the empty kitchen. "They do not want what humans call comfort food." Through the far doorway, James could see them. The delegates. A Threxian warrior with scales that caught light like oil on water, laughing with others of her kind. A cluster of Veyari whose bioluminescent patterns pulsed in rhythms that might have been conversation or contempt. Tall Quelari diplomats who breathed methane through elegant masks. They did not look toward the kitchen. Why would they? It was beneath notice. James set his bag on the counter. The canvas whispered against steel. "When do I start?" he said. The administrator's face did something complicated. Not quite surprise, not quite respect. "Tomorrow, dawn cycle. You will prepare breakfast for the morning assembly." "Breakfast," James repeated. Lily tugged his hand. He looked down at her, at the hope fierce and fragile in her face, and decided, "I can do that." The administrator left without ceremony. James and Lily stood alone in the kitchen that had defeated so many. She reached into his bag and pulled out the recipe box, its edges soft with years of handling, and set it on the counter like a promise. The embassy administrator returned an hour before dawn, his footsteps sharp against the kitchen tile. James had arrived earlier, unable to sleep, and found Lily curled in a chair near the door, her jacket bundled as a pillow. She woke when the lights brightened, blinking like a small owl. "The delegates gather in 1 hour," the administrator said. He moved to the counter where James had laid out his ingredients. Flour in a ceramic canister, eggs in a carton that looked humble against the chrome, a bottle of buttermilk sweating condensation. The administrator's face performed that complicated expression again. "This is your preparation?" "Yes," James said. "For the Galactic Assembly. For breakfast." The administrator's translator clicked as if searching for words that didn't exist. "You misunderstand the stakes, human. The alien queen has not consumed food in 3 cycles, 3 full rotations of her home world. It is a crisis of diplomacy. Her refusal suggests dissatisfaction with the treaty itself. James cracked an egg against the bowl's edge, one-handed, the way Sarah had taught him. The yolk sat golden and perfect in the white. Why hasn't she eaten? No one knows. She will not say. The administrator leaned closer, his obsidian skin catching the overhead lights. Chefs have tried everything. Synthesized delicacies from her home world. Molecular reconstructions of her species' history. One chef created a dish that took 4 days to prepare and required 0 gravity to plate. What happened? Lily asked, her voice small but steady. She looked at it once. The administrator said, then left. James added buttermilk to the bowl, the white liquid swirling into the eggs like clouds. What does she like? We do not know what she likes. We know only what she refuses, which is everything. The administrator straightened. The council has lost patience. If she does not eat soon, the treaty collapses. They will blame Earth for failing to provide adequate hospitality. Lily slipped from her chair and stood beside her father. She barely reached his ribs. My dad makes really good pancakes, she said. The administrator looked at her as if noticing her for the first time. Then at James. Then at the bowl of batter beginning to form under the whisk's rhythm. Pancakes, he said flatly. Yes. You intend to serve the Galactic Assembly pancakes. I intend to serve them breakfast, James said. He whisked steadily, the motion automatic, learned through years of weekend mornings and preschool routines. The kind my daughter loves, the kind my wife perfected. The administrator was silent for 3 long heartbeats. They will laugh at you. They probably will. They will dismiss you before you finish cooking. Maybe. And yet you persist. James looked at Lily, at the hope still burning in her eyes despite the hour, despite the strangeness, despite everything. He looked at the recipe box, sitting open on the counter. Sarah's handwriting faded, but legible, on the cards inside. Yes, he said. I persist. The administrator nodded once, sharp as a blade. Then cook, human, and may your persistence prove less foolish than it appears. He left them alone in the humming kitchen, and James poured the first circle of batter onto the heated griddle, watching it spread and settle, waiting with a father's infinite patience for the bubbles to appear. The griddle sang its familiar song, heat rising in waves that smelled of butter and promise. James watched the batter spread into perfect circles, their edges beginning to set while their centers remained glossy. Lily stood on the step-stool beside him, her role unchanged, whether in their apartment kitchen or this chrome palace. She held the spatula like a sword. Not yet, James murmured. She nodded, eyes locked on the bubbles. Waiting for them to appear was the hardest part, Sarah used to say. Everything good requires patience. The words lived in the recipe card propped against the flour canister, written in ink that had survived 1,000 Saturday mornings. The delegates began arriving in clusters, their voices a tide of clicks and hums and harmonic frequencies that made the air vibrate. James did not turn. He watched the batter. A Threxian warrior passed close enough that her armored tail scraped the counter's edge. She laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling downhill, and said something in her language that made her companions hiss with amusement. They're making fun of us, Lily whispered. I know. Does it bother you? James glanced at her, 7 years old and already fluent in reading his silences. No, he said, and meant it. Bubbles. She leaned forward. Tiny craters had begun appearing across the pancake surfaces, breaking and leaving perfect small holes. Now. Lily slid the spatula beneath the first pancake and flipped it in one smooth motion, revealing a golden brown surface that made James's chest tighten with something close to grief and closer to gratitude. Sarah's recipe, Sarah's patience, Sarah's love translated into heat and flour and time. A Vayari diplomat drifted past, his bioluminescent skin pulsing in patterns that might have been discussed. He spoke to his companion, his translator rendering the words into flat English. Primitive combustion cooking. They burn plant matter and animal excretions. Barbaric. His companion trilled agreement. And the small one participates. Do they train their young in food service? She's my daughter, James said, not loudly, but clearly enough that the Vayari paused mid-step. And she's learning. The Vayari's lights flickered through several colors James couldn't interpret. Then he moved on without response, dissolving into the growing crowd. Lily flipped the remaining pancakes, each one revealing that same golden perfection. James stacked them on the plate, watching steam curl from their surfaces like visible warmth. He added butter that melted instantly, spreading across the top pancake and cascading down the sides in bright rivulets. "Do you think she'll come?" Lily asked. James knew who she meant. The alien queen, who had refused everything. "I don't know. But if she does." He looked at the stack of pancakes, simple and honest, made with nothing more complex than care. "Then we offer her what we have." The main doors opened with a sound like thunder splitting stone. The delegates fell silent, their mockery dying in their throats. And through the doorway, tall as storm systems and twice as strange, the alien queen entered. Her eyes, vast and violet, swept the assembly hall. Then they landed on the kitchen, on the steam, on the golden stack, on the human father and his daughter standing side by side. She began walking toward them. The alien queen moved like weather, inevitable and vast. Her carapace caught the embassy lights and fractured them into colors that had no earth names, her crown a living thing of crystalline branches that hummed with frequencies felt more than heard. The delegates parted without discussion, instinct older than diplomacy, driving them aside. She stood nearly 3 meters tall, her form somewhere between insect and ancient royalty, beautiful in the way cliffs are, beautiful, dangerous in the way oceans are dangerous. James felt Lily's hand slip into his. He squeezed once. "We're okay." The queen stopped at the kitchen's threshold. Her eyes, each the size of James's fist, held depths that suggested intelligence older than human civilization. They fixed on the stack of pancakes, steam still rising in lazy spirals. Behind her, the assembly held its breath. 3 cycles without food. 3 cycles of silent refusal that had bent the treaty toward breaking. "You are the new human chef," the queen said. Her voice required no translator, resonating directly in the bones of James's skull, a sensation like standing too close to massive speakers. "Yes, Your Majesty. You prepared this." Not a question. Her gaze had not left the pancakes. "My daughter and I, yes." The queen's attention shifted to Lily, who somehow did not flinch under that cosmic scrutiny. "The small one cooks. She helps," James said. "She's learning." Something in the queen's expression changed, subtle as continental drift. "Learning," she repeated. The word carried weight beyond its syllables. A Threxian administrator stepped forward, his voice tight with barely contained panic. "Your Majesty, surely you do not intend to consume this primitive offering. We have master chefs preparing your traditional." The queen's hand rose, and the administrator's words died. Her fingers, each tipped with what might have been claw or crown jewel, reached toward the plate. The assembly leaned forward as one organism. Delegates who had dismissed James with laughter now watched with something approaching fear. If she refused again, here, publicly, the treaty would crumble before breakfast ended. James did nothing. Lily held his hand. The pancake steamed. The queen's fingers closed around the top pancake, lifting it with surprising delicacy. Butter dripped from its edges, catching light like liquid gold. She brought it closer, and for a moment James thought she might simply examine it, catalog it, set it down untasted like all the molecular sculptures and synthesized delicacies before. Instead, she took a bite. The sound of her eating was almost inaudible beneath the assembly's collective gasp. She chewed slowly, her vast eyes closing. The crystalline crown above her head pulsed once, bright enough to cast shadows. When she opened her eyes again, they glistened with something that might have been moisture, might have been light, might have been memory made visible. "Who taught you?" the queen said, her voice somehow quieter and larger at once, "to cook with patience instead of speed?" The question landed in the silence like a stone in still water. James felt every delegate's attention pivot toward him. He looked at Lily, at her small face full of trust and hope, and spoke the only truth that mattered. "My wife did," he said, "before she died." The Queen held the half-eaten pancake as if it were something holy. Her crown pulsed again, softer now, a rhythm that felt like heartbeats slowed to glacial time. "Tell me about her," the Queen said. James had not spoken Sarah's name aloud to a stranger in 2 years. Lily's teachers knew, their landlord knew, the few relatives who still called knew. But strangers did not ask, and James did not offer. Yet here, in this chrome kitchen before an alien queen and an assembly that had mocked him moments ago, the words came. "Her name was Sarah," he said. "She worked as a nurse. Night shifts mostly. She'd come home at dawn and make breakfast before sleeping." He gestured at the pancakes. This was her recipe, passed down from her grandmother. She said breakfast was the most important meal because it was the first promise you kept each day. The Queen took another bite, chewing with that same deliberate slowness. "She taught you to cook?" "She taught me to wait," James said. "I used to rush everything. Flip the pancakes too early. Crank the heat too high. She'd put her hand on mine and say, 'Patience. Watch for the bubbles. Let them tell you when they're ready.'" His voice caught, just slightly. She had patience for everything. Her patience. Me. Lily. Lily pressed closer against his side. He felt her shoulders trembling. But when he looked down, she was smiling through tears that hadn't quite fallen. "How did she die?" the Queen asked. The question would have been intrusive from anyone else. From her, it felt like necessary truth. "Cancer," James said. 3 years ago. She fought it for 18 months. Near the end, she couldn't eat much. But she'd still sit with us at breakfast, watch Lily learning to flip pancakes, correcting her technique. He paused. "The morning before she died, she made us promise to keep making them. Saturday mornings, no matter what. She said as long as we kept that promise, she'd still be at the table." The assembly had gone completely silent. Even the translator implants had stopped their mechanical clicking. The Queen finished the pancake, then reached for another. She ate it slowly, reverently, as if each bite required consideration. "My daughter loved the morning meal," the Queen said finally. Her voice carried an edge, like breaking ice. "Before the war, before she fell defending our home world." The crown dimmed. "I have not eaten since her death because food without her presence felt like betrayal." James understood then, not just the refusal, the weight of it. "But she wouldn't want you to stop," he said quietly. The Queen's eyes met his, vast and ancient and filled with a grief that transcended species. "No," she said. "She would not." She took another pancake. "Your wife would not want you to stop either." "No," James agreed. "So we keep the promise." The Queen nodded once, and in that gesture, something shifted. Not just in her, in the room, in the treaty itself. "Yes," the Queen said, "we keep the promise." The Queen consumed 3 more pancakes in silence that felt sacred. Each bite deliberate, each swallow witnessed by an assembly that had forgotten how to breathe. When she finished, she set the empty plate down with a gentleness that contradicted her size, and turned to face the delegates. Her crown blazed bright enough to paint shadows across the chrome walls. "This human understands what your master chefs do not," the Queen said. "Food is not spectacle. It is memory. It is promise. It is love made visible." The Threxian administrator who had mocked James earlier stepped forward, his scales rippling with colors that suggested anger barely contained. "Your Majesty, with respect, this is a dangerous precedent. One meal does not prove the worth of human cuisine. It proves only that grief recognizes grief." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. A Vayari senator raised her voice, her bioluminescent patterns flashing sharp and bright. "We cannot reshape galactic dining protocols based on sentimentality. There are standards, sophistication, complexity that humans simply cannot achieve. Then let him prove it, came a voice from the back. Magistrate Corvin, a Quillari whose species had opposed the treaty from the beginning, pushed through the crowd. His methane mask hissed with each breath, his forearms crossed in challenge. If this, humans cooking, has value beyond emotional manipulation, let him demonstrate it formally. The administrator's eyes gleamed. A trial. Yes, Corvin said. Let him feed the entire council. Breakfast for all species represented here. If he can create something that satisfies even half of us, then perhaps human cuisine deserves consideration. His mask hissed again. But when he fails, Earth's food will be formally banned from this embassy. No more embarrassing experiments. No more primitive combustion cooking. James felt the trap closing. Lily's hand tightened in his. The Queen watched him with those vast violet eyes, waiting. He thought of the recipe box, of Sarah's handwriting fading on cards that held more than instructions. He thought of Saturday mornings and promises kept. He thought of his daughter learning patience, one pancake at a time. I accept, James said. The assembly erupted. Some delegates laughed. Others hissed or clicked or trilled their disapproval. Corvin's mask hissed satisfaction. Tomorrow then. Dawn. You will prepare breakfast for 73 delegates representing 9 species, each with different nutritional needs, different cultural expectations, different standards of excellence. He leaned forward. You will fail, human, and your failure will at least serve a purpose. I have one condition, James said, voice cutting through the noise. The administrator's translator clicked irritation. You are in no position to. Let him speak, the Queen said. James looked down at Lily, at her small, fierce face, at the trust burning in her eyes. My daughter helps me. If I'm cooking for the galaxy, she cooks with me. Corvin laughed, a sound like grinding stones. Even better. Let the child witness her father's humiliation. Agreed, the Queen said, and her word made it law. Prepare well, James Porter. Tomorrow, you feed the galaxy. The kitchen became their world. James and Lily worked through the night while the embassy slept, the overhead lights humming like distant stars. The recipe box sat open, Sarah's cards spread across the counter like a map to somewhere safe. Lily had changed into her apron, the one with flour stains that wouldn't wash out, the one Sarah had sewn for her 5th birthday. Threxians are carnivores, James said, reading from the dietary file the administrator had reluctantly provided. High protein. Their digestive systems process meat in minutes. Protein pancakes, Lily said immediately. She pulled eggs from the refrigerator, counted out 12. Extra eggs, less flour. We can add that protein powder from your gym bag. James smiled despite the weight pressing on his chest. Good thinking. They worked in the rhythm they'd built over years. Lily cracked eggs while James measured. He whisked while she greased the griddle. No wasted movement. No wasted words. The kind of partnership that only comes from repetition and trust. Sarah had taught them both, and in teaching, had woven herself into every gesture. Vayari are silicon-based, James read. They consume crystalline compounds. He frowned. How do you make pancakes from crystals? Lily chewed her lip, thinking. Then she ran to the pantry and returned with a bag of sugar. Rock candy. If we melt it into the batter, it'll create crystal structures as it cools. And we can add mineral supplements. She looked up at him. Like making rock candy pancakes. You're brilliant, James said. Mom said I got that from you. The words hit softly, like snow. James pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. She was lying. You got it from her. They moved to the next species. Quinn were botanical, photosynthetic, consuming nutrients through exposure rather than digestion, but the file noted they appreciated aromatic compounds. James found fresh herbs in the embassy garden, basil, mint, lavender. Lily suggested infusing them into a thin crepe-style pancake that could be warmed to release scent. Hour after hour, they adapted. Buckwheat pancakes with fermented additions for the Zesic, who required pre-digested compounds. Sweet potato pancakes for the Harlan, whose diet centered on complex carbohydrates. Savory pancakes with nutritional yeast for the Quelari, who processed nitrogen differently. Each recipe a variation on Sarah's foundation, each one carrying the same core truth: patience, care, attention. At some point near dawn, Lily leaned against the counter, her eyes heavy. "Dad, what if they still hate it?" James looked at the rows of prepared batters, each labeled in Lily's careful handwriting. "Then we'll know we did our best. That's all Mom ever asked. Is our best enough?" He thought about Sarah in her hospital bed, weak but smiling, making them promise to keep cooking, to keep living, to keep finding joy in small morning rituals. "Our best is all we have, sweetheart, and it's always been enough." The embassy lights brightened. Dawn cycle beginning. Lily straightened, retied her apron. "Then let's feed the galaxy." James fired up all 6 griddles, and they began to cook. The delegates arrived like a storm front, filling the assembly hall with noise and expectation. 73 beings from 9 species, each one hungry for James's failure more than for food. They took their seats in the tiered crescents, armor glinting, scales catching light, bioluminescent patterns pulsing with anticipation. Magistrate Corven stood at the center podium, his methane mask hissing satisfaction. "Let the trial begin," Corven announced. James and Lily emerged from the kitchen carrying the first trays. No servers, no ceremony, just a father and daughter delivering breakfast they'd made with their own hands. James approached the Threxian section first, setting plates of protein pancakes before warriors who had laughed at him yesterday. Their leader, the one whose tail had scraped his counter, looked at the golden-brown circles with undisguised contempt. "Eat," Corvin commanded. She cut into the pancake, brought it to her mouth, chewed. Her expression shifted, scales rippling through colors James couldn't interpret. She took another bite, then another. Her clawed hand trembled slightly as she set down her fork. "This tastes like harvest season on Threx's prime," she said quietly. "Like the protein cakes my mother made before the war." She looked at James with eyes that had seen centuries. "How did you know?" "I didn't," James said. "I just tried to make something worth remembering." Lily moved to the Vayari section, her small hands steady as she placed plates of crystal-infused pancakes before delegates who had called her father barbaric. A senator took one bite, and his bioluminescent patterns stuttered, then blazed in colors that swept across his skin like aurora. "Impossible," he whispered. "The mineral balance, the crystalline structure." His voice broke. "My grandmother made something similar, before our sun changed, before we lost the old ways. One by one, species that had never shared meals began to eat." The Quinn inhaled the aromatic herb pancakes, and their photosynthetic membranes glowed with something like contentment. The Zesic consumed their fermented buckwheat cakes and clicked their approval in rhythms that sounded almost like song. The Harlan closed their multiple eyes in synchronized appreciation. James watched them. These beings who had dismissed humanity as primitive, and saw their faces transform, not with pleasure, with recognition. Each pancake variation had somehow touched something deeper than taste: memory, home, loss, love, the things that transcend species. A young Quelari removed his methane mask briefly, a violation of protocol, to smell the savory pancakes before him. His forearms shook. "My parent used to make morning bread," he said, "before the famine. I had forgotten the smell." The Queen rose from her seat, and the hall quieted. She descended the tiers slowly, majestically, until she stood before James and Lily. "You asked how my daughter loved the morning meal," she said. "She loved it because it meant family, because it meant someone cared enough to wake early and prepare something with their hands." She looked at the assembly. "This human has fed you memory. That is the rarest cuisine of all. Magistrate Corvin stood at the podium, his forearms rigid, his methane mask hissing in rapid bursts that suggested fury or fear, or both. Around him, delegates continued eating, some crying openly, others sitting in stunned silence. The trial had become something else entirely, something he could not control. "This proves nothing," Corvin said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Emotional manipulation is not culinary skill. These are simple pancakes dressed in sentiment." The Threxian warrior rose, her massive frame casting shadows across the tiers. "Then you have never understood food, magistrate." Her scales had settled into colors that suggested both respect and warning. "I have eaten in the finest establishments across 9 systems, molecular constructions that took weeks to prepare, dishes that defied physics. None of them tasted like home. None of them tasted like love." She looked at James. "Until today." A Vayari senator stood next, then a Quinn delegate, then another and another, until half the assembly was on their feet, and Corvin's objections drowned in a tide of voices speaking languages that translators struggled to pass. But the meaning was clear. The vote was already cast. The Queen raised her hand, and silence fell like a curtain. "The trial is concluded," she said. "James Porter has not only proven the worth of human cuisine, he has revealed what we have forgotten in our pursuit of sophistication." Her crown pulsed, bright and certain, that the simplest act of care feeds more than hunger. It feeds the soul. Corvin's mask hissed one final protest. "Your Majesty, we cannot restructure galactic dining protocols based on 'we can.'" The Queen interrupted. "And we will." She turned to the assembly. "Effective immediately, this embassy will implement a new tradition. Each morning, before diplomatic proceedings, we will share breakfast together, not as separate species in separate chambers, but as one table." The implications rippled through the crowd. Species that had never eaten together, species whose conflicts stretched back millennia, sharing morning meals like family. "Furthermore," the Queen continued, "James Porter is appointed cultural bridge chef of the Galactic Embassy. His role is not to serve, but to teach, to help us remember that food is not fuel or spectacle. It is connection." James felt Lily's hand slip into his, squeezing 3 times. "Are you scared?" He squeezed back once. "Not anymore." The administrator approached, his obsidian skin reflecting the overhead lights. "Your kitchen will be expanded," he said, and his voice held something that might have been apology or respect. "You will need equipment for teaching, and you will need staff. The Queen has authorized full resources." "I only need 1 assistant," James said, looking down at Lily. The administrator followed his gaze, then nodded. "She flips pancakes better than our previous 9 chefs combined." Lily beamed. The assembly began to disperse, but slowly, reluctantly, as if leaving meant breaking a spell. The Threxian warrior paused at the kitchen threshold. "Tomorrow," she said to James, "teach me to make the protein cakes. I want to feed my soldiers something that reminds them why we fight." "Dawn cycle," James agreed. "Bring an apron." 3 months passed, like the slow rising of bread, quiet and transformative. The embassy kitchen expanded into something that resembled a classroom more than a commercial operation. Long counters lined with griddles, storage for ingredients from 9 home worlds, and every morning at dawn cycle, delegates arrived not to argue but to learn. The Threxian warrior, whose name was Kesara, mastered protein pancakes and taught them to her soldiers. They ate together before training, and the ritual reduced conflicts in her ranks by half. The Vayari senator brought his grandson, a child whose bioluminescent patterns shifted with curiosity, and together they learned to infuse crystals into batter while James explained patience, and Lily demonstrated bubble-watching technique. The Quelari, who had violated protocol to smell his pancakes, became a regular student. He arrived early, staying late, asking questions about heat distribution and batter consistency with the intensity of someone studying sacred texts. One morning, he confessed he was sending recipes home to his parent, hoping to rebuild what famine had broken. The Queen attended often, though she rarely cooked. She would sit at the corner table, the one James had designated for observers, and watch with those vast violet eyes. Once, she asked Lily about Sarah's recipe box. Lily brought it over carefully, opening it like a treasure chest, and explained each card, each stain, each note in her mother's handwriting. "She wrote this one when I was 4, Lily said, pointing to chocolate chip pancakes. "See?" She put a little heart next to the chocolate measurement. The Queen traced the heart with one crystalline claw. "My daughter drew hearts," she said, "on everything, even battle reports." Her crown dimmed, then brightened. "Thank you for sharing this." The embassy's dining protocols transformed completely. Morning breakfast became mandatory for all diplomatic proceedings. Treaties were discussed over pancakes. Conflicts were mediated with coffee and syrup. Species that had refused to occupy the same room now sat elbow to scale to appendage, passing butter and sharing stories of home. A journalist from Earth visited, documenting the changes for networks that had dismissed the embassy as a failed experiment. She interviewed delegates who spoke of morning meals with a reverence usually reserved for peace accords. The footage went viral across 9 systems. Requests flooded in from other embassies, other stations, other worlds. Could James teach their chefs? Could Lily visit their schools? The administrator approached James one morning with a formal proposal. "The Galactic Council wants to commission a monument," he said, "to commemorate the transformation." "A monument to pancakes?" James asked. "To what pancakes represent?" The administrator pulled up a hologram. It showed a statue, a human man and his daughter at a griddle, her hand holding a spatula, his hand steadying hers. Beneath, an inscription in 9 languages. "Simple acts of care feed more than hunger. They feed hope." James looked at Lily, who had flour on her cheek and pride in her eyes. "What do you think, sweetheart?" She smiled, the same smile Sarah used to give him on Saturday mornings. "I think Mom would like it." The embassy hummed with the sound of morning preparations, and somewhere in the steam and warmth, a father and daughter kept a promise that changed the galaxy.